Welcome back to Be Productive. You know, when we talk about systems and having everything in alignment, we might want to also go through some exercises from the mental perspective to help again make sure that everything is aligned the way it needs to be. So, in this next segment, we're going to talk about mapping. We're going to talk about data mapping and how laying out our data and mapping us out for success can lead to our higher levels of productivity. So, to help me with this is my friend Greg Schaffer. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Clara. Thanks.
You bet. So, I'm excited to hear a little bit about this. So, talk to us a little bit about data mapping and what data mapping really even is.
There's different ways to describe it: data mapping, data flow diagram, data flow mapping diagram, that sort of thing. But basically, they're all accomplishing the same thing. And there's several things that we need to understand in information security and with our data. So we need to understand where the confidential information is, first of all. We need to understand how it flows from system to system. Need to understand how it's protected in the system and how it's processed in the system. We need to understand how it's reported from the system and who has access and why. And we need to also understand how, when, and why the data is destroyed. And that's very important as well, too. We always say that if you don't need to keep the data, then there's no reason to have it because you're spending time, money trying to map it, trying to protect it. So a data flow diagram, which is the way that I like to refer to it as, again, mapping works as well too. It allows for analysis of what we call controls at each stage of the map. So what I mean by controls are these are elements that we put in place to protect both the security and the privacy of our data throughout the entire life cycle, because there's this mantra in information security and privacy is that you can't protect what you don't know about. And basically, a data flow diagram mapping exercise doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to include all of the information that you have that's necessary for your organization and where it lies, basically.
Yeah. What I think is so critical about this is, when I work with my people and take them through the clarity success method, one of the things we talk about is the importance of tracking and measuring. And kind of what you just said, if you don't know what to track, how are you going to know if you're moving forward? And it's very similar to what you're saying too. And going through these exercises are going to help you make sure that you have the right things in place. And that, again, I love what you talked about when you get to a point where you don't need a system. Let's make sure that we, terminate it the right way, because we still want to be able to protect all of those things. Because if we have those folders still open, things could seep in or seep out. So let's again get the closure that we need. So, how do we start to pair all this together? And how does this mapping, how do we mirror this and align this with compliance to make sure that we're staying in compliance with everything?
So a lot of times when we talk about data mapping and data flows, we're referencing one particular regulation which sort of made this popular. I don't know if popular is exactly the right word, but maybe more well known. And that is what we call the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a European regulation, but there are similar privacy regulations in the United States. It's growing. The first one was the CCPA, which I believe is the California Consumer Privacy Act, if I got my acronyms correct. So it's important to understand, first of all, the differences between privacy and security. A lot of times people use those terms interchangeably, which is not correct. They definitely have overlaps, but security is the protection of the information to ensure its what we call confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. Privacy is how you use the information. So what I mean by that is that here, one of my kind of go-to examples is if you work in healthcare, it from a security standpoint, you have access to patient information, and there may be a celebrity in the hospital, for example, and that's all fine and good. But if you don't have a reason to access that celebrity's medical data, you can't access. So from a security standpoint, you have access, but from a privacy standpoint, you're not allowed to. And
Okay.
so what the mapping then does is that the data flow mapping answers several questions along the who and the how and the why. So The who is, well, who has access to the data first and where is it stored? That's what the mapping exercise helps us to determine. Who needs to have access to that data and who is sending the data and where are they sending it to? And then the how are they sending and how are they storing the data? That's the protection aspect. And the why. And probably the why is the most important here. That's the why are you keeping this data? Well, what are the uses for the data? We get back to what we just mentioned a few minutes ago, that if you don't have a need to keep data, then you don't want to keep it. There's no business reason. You're taking on risk without reward. Now,
Mhm.
finally, there's also within these data privacy regulations something that is commonly referred to as the right to be forgotten. And what that refers to is that if you have my personally identifiable, my personal data rather, in your system and you don't need it anymore, I can request from you that you remove that data. So
Mhm.
how do you remove that data if you don't know where it is? And that's where the mapping comes into play.
Yeah, really great. What a great example that you gave with the healthcare and really bringing this all together and identifying the difference between the security and the privacy. One of the things that you talk about is really getting clear on both identifying the information we need, but then also knowing what and how to protect things. So as we're putting these processes together, describe a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that people face in putting these different processes together.
Well, without a doubt, I believe the primary challenge that every business faces, and especially in small and mid-sized businesses, is understanding where your information is. And again, I stress that we can't protect what we don't know about. Now, why is that a challenge? A lot of times, small and mid-sized businesses, they're very flexible, and sometimes departments will go and engage with service providers to do some sort of business need. It's just easier. Like, for what common example is, I need to share a file with someone, so I'm going to get a subscription for my department to Dropbox. Well, if the central organization doesn't know about it, then how can they include that in the data mapping to begin with? You could have very sensitive information being passed through a Dropbox or other shared medium that you don't know about. And your data mapping exercise then becomes, I won't say useless, but certainly not complete. And a not complete data mapping exercise results in gaps. And we all know that gaps then can result in bad things, particularly if those gaps lead to risks that are then exploited. So everything begins with an asset inventory. We want to make sure that we're inventorying all of our assets. And this isn't just the systems involved. The more important part is information is an asset. A lot of people don't think of information as an asset, but for your business, it's probably
Mhm.
one of the, if not the most important asset that you have. So again, the mapping exercise will help identify it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. You want to identify what information do we have? Well, we know that we take credit cards, for example, so we have cardholder data. Okay, that's great. Now we need to figure out where the cardholder data is. Now, all of this involves understanding the company's business processes. And as a virtual CISO, that's one of the things I emphasize, that when we start the data mapping exercise, I don't start by going into the technical aspects of it first. I don't even ask about what information do you have. I ask, what does your business do? And then
Mm.
from there, I'll ask, well, how do you do it? Okay, well, you have a service that provides this. What kind of information are we talking about? What happens to that information? Where does it go? Because again, the other aspect where I was talking about the Dropbox example, we have a name for that in information security and information technology. We call that shadow IT. And that's information technology that's not managed centrally by the organization. It can lead to significant problems. And so if you have an information security officer or a vCISO that says that you shouldn't use like a Dropbox solution like that, and I don't mean to be railing on Dropbox, that's just the example that came to my mind. They're a great organization. But it's not that we're trying to get you not to do something that you need to do for your business. We're always trying to get you to do something for your business in the least riskiest way.
Yeah. And one of the things I appreciate so much about what you do, Greg, is you hear this term cybersecurity. And even that term can instill fear and uncertainty. And because you are an expert and because you've been doing this for so long, you make it simple. You make it less adverse, and you really start to make people feel more comfortable with it so they can build the right systems. So tell us a little bit about, your company, how long you've been doing this and where people can find you.
So VCISO Services, that stands for Virtual Chief Information Security Officer Services, has been in existence since 2017 is when I founded the company. And my mission was very simple. I wanted to help small and mid-sized businesses with their information security needs because they need to have access to the same type of experience that the big businesses have, the chief information security officers, but they don't have the resources to pay nor need to pay for a full-time salary. And we've been in business since 2017. We are located just south of Nashville in Franklin, Tennessee, but we have clients throughout the United States and beyond. And probably the best way to reach us is on our website at www.vcisoservices.com. There's a button up top that says schedule an appointment or something along those lines. If you click in that button, you'll get on my calendar instantly and we'll have a 15-minute talk.
Beautiful. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today. And for all of you that are out there watching and following, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid about and get yourself overwhelmed. When you work with an expert like Greg, they're going to make it simpler because they're going to walk you through the steps to make sure, again, you are very clear on the information you need and how to protect that information. So stay tuned. We'll be right back for more Be Productive.